It's one of the few things everyone alive has in common. We all sleep. What kind of mattress we sleep on, when we get to sleep, how long we sleep for, those all vary. But everyone needs to sleep sometime. It's a function of living that has confounded scientists and the general public for as long as we can remember. And the question of why we sleep has proven over the years to be very difficult to solve.
The crass answer used to be that we sleep to cure sleepiness, which is utterly useless. It's like saying you eat to cure hunger. It tells you nothing about the benefits of food. But now, after 50 or 60 years of incredible research, we know that sleep is the single most effective thing that we can do to reset the brain and body health. And that every major organ and system within the body and every process within the brain is wonderfully enhanced by sleep when we get it and is demonstrably impaired when we don't get enough.
That's Matthew Walker, a professor of neuroscience and psychology at the University of California-Berkeley and author of Why We Sleep, the New Science of Sleep and Dream.
Once you get less than 7 hours of sleep, we know that we can measure objective scientific deficits in both your brain and your body. So, for example, your immune system will start to degrade. After just one night of short sleep, we actually observe a 70% reduction in anti-cancer fighting immune cells. We know it's critical for your cardiovascular system, and we know that all it takes, for example, is 1 hour of lost sleep, because there is a global experiment that's performed on 1.6 billion people twice a year called daylight savings time. And when we look in the spring, when we lose an hour of sleep, there is a 24% increase in heart attacks the next day. But yet in the fall, when we gain an hour of sleep, there is a 21% decrease in heart attacks. So every major disease that seems to be killing us in the developed world now has significant and causal links to a lack of sleep. That's how critical it is for wellness. It is the Swiss Army knife of health, as it were.
One of the issues associated with a lack of sleep is Alzheimer's disease. And Walker says scientists have begun to understand what the link behind the relationship is.
The link between sleep loss and Alzheimer's disease really is now quite strong. There is actually a sewage system in the brain, and it's called the glymphatic system. Now, you have a sewage system in your body, it's called the lymphatic system, but the brain has one too. Now, the time when that sewage system in the brain kicks into high gear is not when we're awake, but it's when we're actually asleep. So it's sort of a good night, sleep clean scenario. Now, one of the toxic metabolic byproducts that sewage system washes away during sleep at night is a sticky protein called beta amyloid. And beta amyloid is one of the leading causes or contributing factors, we believe, to Alzheimer's disease. So if you're not getting that sleep at night, you're not washing away all of that toxic Alzheimer's protein.
The desire to chase a solid night's sleep has driven people for centuries to look for sleeping enhancements. If you lay down at night and your mind starts racing, you may end up wasting hours of sleeping time on needless worries. For decades, many believed that a simple solution is to have a nightcap at the end of a long day, an alcoholic beverage just before bedtime to help you fall asleep.
Alcohol is a class of drugs that we call the sedatives, and sedation is not sleep. So what you're doing with alcohol is just knocking yourself out. You're not getting naturalistic sleep. The other two things that are problematic with alcohol, I'm sorry to say, is that it actually fragments your sleep, so that you will wake up many more times throughout the night, and you don't tend to remember them, so you don't recall that the alcohol was causing that sleep problem. And finally, alcohol actually blocks your dream sleep, what we call rapid eye movement sleep, which is critical for aspects of emotional regulation and mental health, as well as creativity.
More recently, the old nightcap advice has been replaced by the boom of sleeping pills, pharmaceutical solutions that promise to give us the rest we need after a long, hard day. Once again, Walker says not so fast.
I should preface this by saying I'm not anti-medication. I think there are medications that are wonderful for lots of different ailments, but the problem is that no drug that we currently have right now can produce naturalistic sleep. And the current classic drugs that people take, the sleeping pills, they are a class of drugs that we call the sedative hypnotics. So a little bit like alcohol, sedation, again, is not that natural sleep. We also know, however, unfortunately, that sleeping pill use is associated with a far higher risk of death as well as cancer. Now, I should note that we don't currently understand whether that relationship is simply correlational or it's actually causal. And I think those studies need to be done. But the public just doesn't seem to be aware of this evidence linking sleeping pills with deathly consequences in cancer. And that was part of the motivation for the book, that chapter there. I wanted to get that information out there so that the public could at least be informed and make a choice.
On the opposite end of the spectrum from sleeping pills and alcohol, we have caffeine. Caffeine isn't sold to help people get to sleep, but rather to keep them awake, maybe because they haven't been getting very good nights of sleep.
Caffeine actually keeps you awake, it makes you alert, and it blocks a sleepiness signal that gradually builds up the longer that you've been awake. And after about 16 hours of that sleepiness pressure building up, normally all of us would fall asleep and stay asleep. But caffeine comes in and blocks that sleepiness signal. Now, some people will say, I'm one of those people who I can have a coffee after dinner and I fall asleep just fine. And that may be true, but the other problem with caffeine is that it prevents you from getting the deep quality of sleep that you normally get. So people will often wake the next morning, feel unrefreshed. They won't have had a problem falling asleep or staying asleep, and they don't connect the dots. They don't realize that it was the cup of coffee after dinner that caused that lack of deep sleep, and hence they start drinking more caffeine and they're more alert, so then they start taking sleeping pills, and it's a vicious cycle.
So if alcohol, caffeine, and sleeping pills all fail to improve our sleeping schedules, what can be done? Well, a few things. Walker says one important thing to try is to reinforce our body's association between sleep and the bed.
Modernity at this stage has put us on constant reception. We're constantly bombarded. We're constantly, in the on switch position. And it's only when our head hits the pillow that we shift from going from reception to reflection. And in fact, that's the last time that we should go into that Rolodex of anxiety and the spinning wheels. There are things that people can do. It turns out that meditation is one of the things that appears to help. And the science is very good behind this. I'm a hard-nosed scientist. I was very skeptical of the evidence. And I started trying it. And that was 5 months ago. And I'm still meditating now. And the other, I think, issue that people make a mistake with is staying in bed awake. You shouldn't do that. If you've been awake in bed for 15 or 20 minutes, get out of bed, go to another room, just use dim light and read a book or a magazine. And only come back to bed when you're sleepy.
And if you find that no matter what you try, a good night's sleep seems impossible, Walker says cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia is available and has been found to be effective in helping sufferers get to sleep and stay asleep. You can learn more about Matthew Walker and his research in the book Why We Sleep: Unlocking the Power of Sleep and Dreams. For information about all of our guests and past shows, visit viewpointsradio.org. And to get more behind the scenes, check out Viewpoints Radio on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. This segment originally aired in December of 2018 and was written by Evan Rook. Studio production by Jason Dickey. I'm Marty Peterson.
Viewpoints returns in just a moment.
Non-attorney paid spokesperson. Could your house go into foreclosure? Are you behind on your mortgage payments? Does it seem like the bank has no interest in helping you save your home? And you feel like you have nowhere to turn for help? Then we have good news for you. Foreclosure Protection Services can help save your home as they specialize in foreclosure assistance. That's all they do. If you're behind on your mortgage payments, being threatened with foreclosure, have been denied a loan modification, or been the victim of a predatory loan, it's critical that you call Foreclosure Protection Services now
At 800-838-8151.
Their network of attorneys and their agents are available to speak to you now. If you're behind on your mortgage payments, Foreclosure Protection Services can help stop the foreclosure process. Call today before it's too late. New laws are in effect that may save your home.
Call Foreclosure Protection Services now at 800-838-8151. 800-838-8151. That's 800-838-8151.
Welcome to Culture Crash, where we examine what's new and old in entertainment. On September 4th, Netflix is set to release I'm Thinking of Ending Things, a thriller based on the novel of the same name by Ian Reid, which was adapted for the screen by writer-director Charlie Kaufman. With more Kaufman on the way, it's the perfect time to revisit some of the previous work of Charlie Kaufman, who is truly one of the most original and inventive screenwriters I've ever come across. Kaufman's work burst onto the scene in 1999 with the release of Being John Malkovich, a deeply strange and surreal story about a puppeteer who discovers a secret tunnel that can transport people into the mind of famed actor John Malkovich for 15 minutes at a time. Enthralled by his discovery, the puppeteer and his colleague begin selling admission into Malkovich's mind, and, well, things only get stranger from there. In 2002, another of Charlie Kaufman's scripts, Adaptation, was released as a film starring Nicolas Cage, Meryl Streep, and Chris Cooper. That film saw Kaufman write a version of himself into the movie, which is about himself trying to adapt a book into a movie. It's very meta, and if meta is your thing, then Kaufman's 2008 directorial debut, Schenectady, New York, might be the perfect film for you. Schenectady, New York is about a theater director who makes a play, which ends up being the focus of his play, and the entire operation becomes a funhouse mirror of actors and directors all acting and directing each other's actions. It's confusing and existential, and a bit mind-bending, which is true of all of Charlie Kaufman's work. Still, my favorite movie written by Kaufman is Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, which was released in 2004 and tells the story of a man, played by Jim Carrey, seeking to have his ex-girlfriend, played by Kate Winslet, removed from his memories. Like all of Kaufman's movies, Eternal Sunshine is a deeply moving story that uses surreal elements, dark comedy, and some thriller-like sequences to disorient and engage with its audience. There's no real use in trying to explain a Kaufman movie because they really demand to be experienced, and in most cases, rewatched for things to really all click into place. Charlie Kaufman's films manage to be their own thing entirely, and at a time when a lot of people are lamenting the lack of creativity in modern filmmaking, his movies are a real breath of fresh air. Being John Malkovich and Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind are now streaming on Netflix. I'm Thinking of Ending Things premieres on Netflix on September 4th, and Kaufman's other films are available to rent. I'm Evan Rook.
And now a game of Commercial Chicken, brought to you by Progressive, where we see how long Flo can go without talking about insurance. Ready? Go.
So, have you noticed how everyone's grammar is completely awful now? Like, the texting and the LOLs. Whatever happened to punctuation? I mean, drivers who switch to Progressive could save big.
Okay, you win. We can't help but save customers money. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates.
Blue Star medicated ointment works fast to relieve the pain and itch of almost any skin irritation.
It's amazing. It's like as soon as you put it on, you can feel it working. We've had Blue Star in the family for years. It works on everything.
I love the cooling sensation on my athlete's foot.
What a relief for my eczema.
Nothing worked on my dry, cracked skin until I tried Blue Star.
Blue Star is great for scalp itch.
Look for the white box with the blue star in the first aid section. Feel Blue Star work fast, or your money back.
And that's Viewpoints for this week. Viewpoints is a production of MediaTrax Communications. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram to learn more about upcoming shows. And find a library of past programs on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and Spotify. Plus, you'll always find previous segments and more information about our guests at viewpointsradio.org. Join us again next week for another edition of Viewpoints. Coming up next week.
I'm definitely definitely nervous about it. We all are. That's kind of what everybody's talking about these days is, gosh, can we imagine a future in which it's even hotter?
As if 2020 couldn't get any worse, record-sweeping wildfires and extreme heat are plaguing California. Then,
the government is able to look at us with full transparency, but we can't watch them watching us.
The vast access the government has to each and every American citizen. I'm Marty Peterson.
And I'm Gary Price. These stories in depth on your public affairs magazine, Viewpoints.